The first person that I want to introduce on the stage, and the reason we asked her to come here, is that there are very, very few places in this world now where nature has not been disturbed by man and where we can actually see the real wild. Very few indeed. So I think it's most of us seem to be looking at rewilding projects, but why don't we have a look at a real wild project which doesn't bring rewild? And let's go and see what nature has done first. And the next person has been passionately researching and putting her own funds, her own time and effort into protecting these bees. And it gives me a great pleasure to invite Jenny onto the stage to come and talk to us about the wild bees in South Africa. So Jenny, please.
Thank you, Jenny. Hello, thank you very much for the invitation. We really appreciate being here. It's quite difficult for Karen and myself from South Africa. We are known as Ujubee in South Africa. Uchu means honey in Zulu, and it's one of the languages I speak. Karen speaks Xhosa, but I speak Zulu. So we are conservationists. I'm not a beekeeper, so a lot of the discussions that you're having here are very alien to me, and quite frankly to the bees as well. So we live in a country where we have two races of honeybees, Scutellator and Carpensis. The region that I originate from was Scutellator land, but I live in the Cape, which is where Carpensis is. Now, this is a country that has 90% of her bees wild. Let me repeat that. 90% of our honeybees live in the wild, and they are healthy and well. It's our managed bees that are showing signs of sickness. And as we've heard from a number of people at this conference, it's what we do to bees that makes them unwell. That is very clear. These creatures are very ancient, and they know how to live, and they know how to medicate, and they know how to be healthy in this world. So Karen and I, we research wild bees in pristine environments. Now, the Cape there are 6 floral kingdoms on this planet, and ours is the only floral kingdom that is located in one country. It's the smallest, most diverse floral kingdom on the planet. We have 9,600 species of flowers. 9,600 species of flowers. The next rival to us is the rainforest, which has 1/3 of what we have. So this is a very, very, very species-rich, from a flower point of view, place. So we have very diverse flowers. It's the most threatened. It's the hottest hotspot on the planet Earth. So hotspot is defined by when 70% of that environment is threatened. So we have a very, very threatened environment, which is a World Heritage Site. We work there. And this is what it looks like. This is our office. And it's 77 square kilometers of pristine, it's known as fynbos. The floral kingdom is fynbos, fine bush, directly translated. So this is 77 square kilometers. It's a section of the Table Mountain National Park. So there are 30 mountains that go all the way back to Cape Town. And we work in this environment. It's run by the South African National Parks, Sand Parks, and we have a special permit that allows us to go anywhere in this entire reserve. But we're mostly based here in 77 square kilometers of pristine environment. It is also the windiest place on the continent of Africa. So this is super windy. We have probably 15 wind still days in a year. Mostly it's gale force. So there are no trees here, really. If the trees are here, there's a milkwood forests, but they're small and milkwoods go right down to the ground. Everything is adapted to the wind. And it has its own honeybee. In this 6% of South Africa is the fynbos region, and it has this Cape honeybee. And she's a very special bee. But let me just show you some pictures of this environment. So this is what we walk around in this current sitting there, looking back towards the point. I've shown you the other picture from the point. Every single week, there's a new flowering of flowers. There are flowers coming up all the time. This environment doesn't stop flowering. And the diversity per square meter is extraordinary. We took this photograph just before we left. Today is the first day of spring in Africa, and so this is a spring image, but this is pretty much what's going to be happening now for a long time in the reserve. It's kilometers of flowers, and as you can see, it's quite short, and there's a lot of wind, so the bees fly low, and they're quite easy for us to track when they're flying low. It is a very visceral environment. When you walk in the fynbos, because we have a permit that allows us to go anywhere, we have to walk carefully, but the fynbos has the most extraordinary smell. And you crush it and you walk it through it. It's in this incredible, beautiful environment. And we often think, wow, imagine what the bees are sensing in this environment. It is very strong for our nose. And we know that bees, their senses are much more attuned to it than ours. So this environment is prone to fire. There are periods where there are fires that move through, massive fires, mostly in summertime when the gale force winds are going. Maybe lightning will cause fire. Mostly at the moment it's human beings. People like to see the helicopters come and bomb the fires, but in a national park they won't necessarily put the fires out, they are left to burn. So the fire burns the environment completely, and of course that was a big concern. One thinks, oops, the flowers are gone, but these fires are part of the ecology. So the bees have adapted, and they've been here millions of years, and they know how to survive. So part of what they do, well, let me introduce you. This is the Cape honeybee. She's mostly a small black bee. And this particular flower is known as our snow. And it comes out in November. So the nest sites, we go around, so far in the 77 square kilometers, we found 92 wild colonies, but the nest sites, they're not all occupied. At the moment there's a drought on in our country for the past 3 years, so they're doing something interesting. They're moving to find forage. The nest sites vary. We take our work is to document every single thing that we see in relation to what the bees are up to, who eats the bees, where they live, the choice of nest sites. So most of the nest sites are chosen with fire in mind. They have to survive fire. So under rock crevices and recesses set down, the colonies can go right down to the ground, and there are interesting creatures that live with the bees, and I'll show you a video later on. And there's this incredible connection always to the flowers. They fly in, often they're resting on the flowers and cleaning themselves, the resins from the flowers and the oils from the flowers. It's very much a part of their world. We've noticed too that a lot of the crevices that when they're coming in from the wind, they need a rest or a recovery area, as we call it. So as they come in, the nest site will have, this one will have a recovery area. It's over a cliff, so it will recover. But my next slide will show it. But just before I get there, I want to show you a unique feature in terms of African bees. It's known as follow flow. Every day the scout bees will go out and assess the environment to see what's coming into flower. That information comes back to the house bees. The house bees will clear an area on the comb, and the queen will be ushered in. She will lay in that area that's been cleaned, and those bees will hatch in time for the flowers. So we have unpredictable weather, and so our bees are almost breathing in the same way that the flowers are flowering. So they don't hibernate. They go right through winter because it's a winter rainfall area, and we have a lot of flowers in winter. So this colony, you can see it breathing in terms of the amount of flowers, but it doesn't necessarily swarm. It's not a reproductive swarm that comes off here. They just breathe, and they've lived there and been in these cavities for hundreds of years. We have evidence of old maps that cite certain places in this reserve. So these bees have been here for a very, very long time, and African bees follow flow. There's a lot of information about what is flowering and how the colony size should be. So, as I said, the recovery area can look like this. As the bees come in, and it's very, very windy, and they need to adjust before they land on the comb, there's often a choice of a recovery area. So for those of you who want to put your bees out in the wind, think about a recovery area for them. Now, this is an image of propolis, and you can see the holes down the bottom as the bees are coming in here. And this is typical of our African bees, the use of propolis and the amount of propolis that is used. It's on the floor, it's on the walls, they make massive curtains with it, and it's exquisite. And here's another nest that is in a cliff. These are small nests. They're not big, big nests. They're about 35 litres on average, but sometimes it's difficult for us to say absolutely because they're in a recess and we can't access them. But this nest here, the heat of the day was about 65 degrees, so it started to make the propolis thinner, and so it's dropped off here and exposed the colony, which we were able to then access and see into that particular space. And this nest, if you've visited us outside, I've got a big photograph of this, and this colony is presently putting this propolis onto the colony to actually close up. They're closing up from that side, and it's a huge amount of work, but it's very, very, very important to them. And this is the one factor that I wanted to focus on because I had a limited amount of time. And it is this very thing, this propolis. And if you imagine an environment that is absolutely diverse with flowers, and if we start looking at the flowers and magnifying what's on the leaves and what's on the buds, you get all of this essential oils and these resins. And the resin collecting bees go out every day and they're collecting this stuff and they're taking it back. And this video that I want to show you, we put it up on our Facebook page some time ago, and it seemed to get a lot of attention. This is what bees in the wild do every day. There is we call it kneading. They're maintaining the propolis, and they use their mandibles and their front legs, and they knead it like bread, for those of you who bake bread. And this is an activity that they do every day, and they apply new oils and resins into the propolis wall. This is their first layer of immunity. And let me show you. So if you see the action of the bees here, there's a very particular action that they're taking. That makes the oils release to the surface, and it keeps this entire propolis alive. When the colony leaves, this becomes brittle and dry. When they're living here, you can see this texture. That's all of those little hands and mandibles working day in and day out. Every day they will go in, and there must be something that they're applying to that as well. This substance is super important. The next video that I'm going to show you, there's a lot of wind in this video, but that's typical of the environment. Watch this hole here. The bees are leaving to go foraging out of this hole. As they go, they are wiping themselves with propolis, the essential oils that are coming out of this propolis. They cover themselves in it, and so they disinfect themselves on leaving, and on arriving back they do the same. So they go out and they come back and they've disinfected themselves. There are hundreds of essential oils that are releasing from here. And you can imagine too that as it gets hotter, they are breathing that in as well. It is a primary part of their immunity. So here they come out here, and they're wiping themselves down with all the oils that have been worked here and that are moist and released. Some of them do a better job than others. Watch her. She takes her time coming out, and she's rather particular about what she does. You know, when your parents told her to wash her hands, some of us did it quickly and others did it much more thoroughly. She's one of those. She's a little bit more cautious about what she's going to engage with out there primary immunity for bees. And it's on the floor, it's on the walls, and this is what keeps them very, very, very healthy in the wild. Super important for bees, propolis. It's not just about temperature control or a wall of camouflage, as we see, because they incorporate many things into the propolis. This is the primary thing that we see. It's part of their immunity. So we see colonies on cliffs. The propolis is always there. Wherever the bees are going to land, the propolis is there. And it is, as I said, very, very, very important to bees. So these environments also, other creatures live with the bees in the wild. And this is a pseudoscorpion on my finger there. And we see the pseudoscorpions in most of our nests. And they are super, super important. Not only do the pseudoscorpions know that that's an important environment for them to live in, they will survive. They'll survive fires, because these nest sites will survive fires. But they'll be fed. They get food from the bees, they eat the mites. The bees, the next video I'll show you, the bees are feeding them wax moth eggs. So these creatures, there are many creatures that live in a wild colony. Beetles, pseudoscorpions, all sorts of creatures. But there's a balance, and they all play a role in the health of the wild bees. This little video, I'm extremely proud of it, because when I filmed it, I didn't see what was going on. When I got home, I got to see what was going on. I knew there were pseudoscorpions. This is the wild colony here, and there's going to be a bee that comes out. I just have to use Tom's pointer for this. And she's going to come out from underneath the colony. There's a pseudoscorpion just down here. She's bringing an egg out. She's going to drop it, and in front of the pseudoscorpion. Pseudoscorpions can't see. And so, as she leaves, the pseudoscorpion grabs her on the leg and says, "Where is it?" And she'll go back and she'll nudge the pseudoscorpion to the egg. There she comes, and she drops the egg. Pseudoscorpion is just over here. So she leaves, and the pseudoscorpion's got her by the leg. She comes back, and she nudges the pseudoscorpion, which is here. She nudges it in the direction of where the egg is. The pseudoscorpion has gone off to find it. If you look carefully, there's another pseudoscorpion underneath this feather over here. This entire ground is teeming with life. Wax moth larvae underneath here, and there are all kinds of worms. And the bees are living very, very happily with all of this. These are very, very happy bees, because they have an entire ecosystem living with them. Everything is playing its role. Isn't that an awesome video? Yeah. So one of the things that we have started in South Africa is conservation is a strong history in our country, and our bees are protected. We spent 3 years working with all the conservation bodies to make sure that they recognize the very important place of this very special bee in their environments that they are legally obliged to protect. I'm happy to say that the legislation is very strongly in favor of wild bees in South Africa. Agriculture will never own that narrative. Conservation will always own the narrative for our wild bees. We're very fortunate, we've done a lot of work in that. And one of the things that we've started is, it's called COMB, and it stands for Caretakers of Mellifera Bees, and it's a volunteer program. We started with the town closest to our research area, people who are very interested in following wild bees. So we are training this group of women. None of them have ever kept bees, but they are interested in following wild bees and learning from wild bees. You know, those of you who know people who watch birds, bird watchers, these are bee watchers. And they have all come to talks of mine, and they've all been inspired by the wild bees, and they want to know more. And we can get data from them, they collect data from us. They look after all the wild bees in their town and in their surrounding areas. And we take them out and we teach them about the bees. It's the most wonderful experience. They love it, and they think that people who keep bees in boxes are crazy. And we understand that we live in a part of the world where we're very lucky. Our situation is very different to the rest of the world. But I think that the rest of the world can look at our situation and aspire to go back there, because you can go back. You have to let your bees go wild, and you have to protect them in the wild. And that's important, is that your legislation has to allow for them to be wild. And all of you need to lobby for that, because this is where they're happiest. And this is where you can enjoy them. It's the most beautiful experience to follow wild bees and to learn from them. Thank you.
These species that you've got in your area, because we looked at the honeybee, but have you got lots of other solitary bees and all the other in there?
Yep. Is this thing? Can you hear me? Yeah, we've got over about 1,000 different solitary bee species. Over 1,000.
Wow. Another one for Jenny. We've got two people down here, so let's go for that and then pass it to Jenny.
Yeah, I was in South Africa myself now, but I'm just wondering about predators. I think you have the human, which is the biggest one, and you have the honey badger then as well. So have you any kind of ways of you just let nature look after itself?
I don't manage the bees.
Predators.
Let me explain very carefully. I'm a conservationist, so this is a nature conservation environment. So I visited it. I get locked out at night. I go into their world. This is a balanced ecosystem. In our particular reserve, in this particular reserve, there aren't any ratels, honey badgers, and they're not endemic to that particular area. So in terms of predators, many predators, many things eat bees. Many birds eat bees, many kinds of spiders, lizards. Lizards. No, the bats don't eat bees. There's only one species of bat in this particular area, and but there are many predators of bees. And as a conservationist, one watches all of those interactions. Who gets to be well? Who do the bees feed? We don't intervene with anything, we just document everything that we see. This is a paradise for bees, this is a beautiful environment, it's a paradise for humans too. When you're in this environment, you realize how disconnected we are, and also you realize the community of life there. There is a harsh environment, and there's this incredible interconnectedness with everything. And this floral kingdom is extraordinary.
Great.
Thank you. Your work is excellent and so interesting. I have a question about Africanized bees and where your relationship is to them, and are these the Africanized bees that you're familiar with, or are these different species?
I'm from Africa. These are African bees.
Right. Are they aggressive, like?
Well, the word aggressive is relative. In Africa, we're all aggressive.
I like to use the word defensive anyway.
Those of you who've met me might think I'm aggressive. We're defensive. The African bee, the Cape honeybee is often referred to as the Cape honeybee, and Apis mellifera scutellata, the other race that we have in South Africa in the summer rainfall area, is often referred to as the African bee. The African bee was taken across to Brazil. The scutellata was taken to Brazil in the 50s. African bees are defensive of their nests. They are very good caretakers of their babies and of the colony. So you have to learn very quickly the sounds when you're accepted into their space, and you have to be extremely respectful of that. We are very aware that these are wild indigenous animals that have an incredibly important place, and in working with them, we have to understand their language. And so we learn very quickly when we are able to move into their space and when we're not, and what are the reasons for our not being allowed in, or why are they allowing us in. So we don't take anything for granted, and we do not work with pea suits. We work as we are now, because it's very, very important to learn that language, because we're learning from them. We don't want to impose on them, we don't want to stick in them, collect anything. We want to observe And it's very, very important that, you know, technology is a phenomenal thing. You can film everything. And often when I'm filming, I'm removed. I go home and I review what I've done. Sometimes just leave the camera at home and go and sit. And be very, very quiet and just be in that space. We're losing that sense. And in this conference, I've seen so many people holding up their phones and filming everybody. You're going to lose that immediate connection with the speaker. It's better to learn to listen, because you're going to need those skills with bees. You need to listen to bees. That's their language. And humans are learning, I don't know what we're learning in terms of communication, but we're losing it. And if you are in nature, one of the most important things is to be still and to be present to what is going on. Because Karen and I had to learn over years what was common for the bees, common behavior, because the extraordinary jumps out. And that's only because we've spent many, 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 many hours, day in, day out, with these creatures in their space. And we listen. We are very, very careful, and we have a tremendous reverence for everything that is happening around it. We realize just how we as a species are so fundamentally disconnected. By the way, we live in hives. We should live in the wild.
Okay, because of the time going on, I know there are lots of questions still for Jenny, but I'm going to have to go on.